The words hit me across the Thanksgiving table like a slap. "Well, maybe that's because you're adopted," Melissa said, laughing as she pointed her fork at me. Everyone erupted into laughter. My aunt nearly choked on her wine. Uncle Paul slapped the table. Even my mother chuckled behind her napkin. I sat there holding the cranberry sauce, watching my family laugh at what they thought was just another one of Melissa's harmless jokes. But something cold settled in my chest. Not because the comment hurt, though it did. Because nobody rushed to deny it. Nobody said, "Don't be ridiculous." They just laughed. And for the first time in my 24 years, I wondered if my sister knew something I didn't. The silence that followed their laughter stretched too long. I forced a smile and passed the sauce, but my hands were shaking. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept replaying the moment over and over. The way Melissa's eyes had sparkled with something that looked less like humor and more like satisfaction. The way my parents exchanged a glance before laughing. The way nobody defended me. I'd grown up feeling different from my family, but I'd always blamed it on being the quiet one. Melissa was loud, confident, everything they seemed to want. She was 28 with a successful marketing job and an Instagram following that made family gatherings feel like photo shoots. I was a bookkeeper at a small accounting firm, invisible in family photos, forgettable in family stories. But lying there in my childhood bedroom, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd stuck to the ceiling when I was 10, something clicked. Maybe I felt different because I was different. Maybe Melissa's joke wasn't a joke at all. My name is Kiera, and I've spent my entire life trying to fit into a family that never seemed to have space for me. My parents, Tom and Patricia, were high school sweethearts who got married young and built their dream life in suburban Connecticut. Melissa came first, their perfect princess who could do no wrong. I came 18 months later, the afterthought who was always too quiet, too sensitive, too much work. Growing up, I was the daughter who had to earn love through good grades and good behavior. Melissa got love just for existing. She got the bigger bedroom, the later curfew, the benefit of every doubt. I got lectures about trying harder, being more social, learning from my sister's example. I'd accepted it as normal until that Thanksgiving dinner made me question everything. Maybe I wasn't just the disappointing daughter. Maybe I wasn't really their daughter at all. The next morning, Melissa posted a photo from dinner on Instagram. The caption read, "Thanksgiving with the family, and our little adoption secret, #family love blessed, Thanksgiving 2023. 237 likes. Dozens of laughing emojis. Comments like, "Stop, you're so bad," and "Poor Kiera." My stomach twisted as I scrolled through the responses. Everyone thought it was hilarious. My own aunt had commented, "Dead," with 3 crying laughing emojis. I screenshot the post, though I wasn't sure why. Maybe because seeing it in writing made it feel more real. Maybe because I needed proof that this wasn't just my imagination running wild. The joke was public now, shared with hundreds of people who didn't know me well enough to defend me. But then again, neither did my family. I drove back to my apartment in Hartford that Sunday morning, my head spinning with questions I'd never thought to ask. Why didn't I have baby pictures from the hospital like Melissa did? Why did I have my father's coloring, but none of his features? Why did strangers always comment on how different I looked from my family? I'd brushed off these observations for years, attributing them to genetics being weird or people being nosy. But now they felt like clues I'd been too naive to piece together. That afternoon, I sat on my couch with my laptop and did something I'd never imagined doing. I Googled DNA testing. The results filled my screen with promises of ancestry discoveries and family connections. 20 minutes later, I'd ordered a kit from the most popular company. Rush delivery. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. The waiting would be torture, but not knowing felt worse. The kit arrived Tuesday morning. I stared at the box for an hour before opening it, scared of what I might find, but more scared of staying in the dark. The instructions were simple. Spit in a tube, register the kit online, mail it back. But as I filled out the registration form, my hands trembled. What if Melissa was right? What if my parents had been lying to me my entire life? What if I really was adopted and they just never told me? The thought should have been devastating, but instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. It would explain so much. Why I'd never felt like I belonged. Why my achievements were never enough. Why Melissa seemed to have a handbook for navigating our family that I'd never received. I sealed the sample and walked it to the mailbox before I could change my mind. 4 to 6 weeks for results. The longest wait of my life was about to begin. I didn't tell anyone about the test. Not my best friend Amy, not my coworkers, definitely not my family. I went through the motions of my normal life while a countdown clock ticked in my head. At work, I caught myself staring at my reflection in my computer screen, searching for features that might belong to someone else. At lunch, I studied families at restaurants, wondering if any of those strangers might be related to me. I started paying attention to things I'd ignored before. How Melissa and I had completely different sleeping patterns. How she could eat dairy while I was lactose intolerant. How she tanned beautifully while I burned, despite our mother insisting I just needed better sunscreen. These differences had always been there, but I'd never thought of them as evidence. Now they felt like pieces of a puzzle I was finally ready to solve. The waiting was agony, but it was also the first time in years that I'd felt hopeful about learning something true about myself. 3 weeks into the wait, my mother called. Melissa told me about her little Thanksgiving joke, she said, her voice tight. "You're not upset about that, are you? You know how she is." I could picture her face, the same expression she'd worn when she'd excused Melissa for breaking my toys, ruining my school projects, or accidentally deleting my saved games. The same expression that said I was the problem for being hurt. "I'm not upset," I lied, because it was easier than starting a fight I couldn't win. "Good," she said, sounding relieved. "You girls need to stick together. Family is all we have." But as I hung up, I realized that if the test came back positive for adoption, family might mean something completely different than I'd thought. Maybe I had biological relatives somewhere who would actually claim me. Maybe I had a family that would choose me instead of tolerating me. The thought scared and thrilled me in equal measure. Week 4 brought nightmares. Dreams where I opened my test results to find a blank screen. Dreams where I confronted my parents and they laughed like it was another Thanksgiving joke. Dreams where I found my real family only to have them reject me too. I woke up most mornings, exhausted, like I'd been running all night. At work, my boss asked if I was feeling okay. I told her I was just tired, but the truth was more complicated. I was terrified and excited and angry all at once. Terrified that everything I'd known about myself was wrong. Excited that I might finally have answers to questions I'd carried my whole life. Angry that it had taken Melissa's cruelty to make me brave enough to seek the truth. I started Googling adoption stories, reading about adults who discovered their origins late in life. Some were heartwarming reunions. Others were devastating dead ends. I bookmarked article after article, preparing myself for every possible outcome. The email arrived on a Thursday morning at 7:42 a.m. "Your DNA results are ready." I was drinking coffee in my pajamas when my phone buzzed, and I nearly dropped the mug. My heart hammered as I logged into the website, watching the loading screen spin like it held my entire future. And there it was, my genetic breakdown. The family matches, the truth I'd been waiting for. I stared at the screen for a full minute before the words registered. Then I started laughing. Not the bitter laugh I'd expected, but something closer to relief. Melissa had been right about me being different. She just hadn't known how different. The test showed I was 50% European, 30% Scandinavian, and 20% Native American. Nothing shocking there. But when I scrolled down to the family matches, my world shifted. There was my mother, listed as a confirmed match. Patricia Walsh, relationship. Mother. But my father's name wasn't on the list. Tom Walsh was nowhere to be found. I refreshed the page 3 times thinking it was a mistake, but the results didn't change. According to the DNA, Patricia was definitely my biological mother. But Tom Walsh, the man who'd raised me, wasn't my biological father. I scrolled through the family matches, looking for any name I recognized, any Walsh or anyone from my father's side. Nothing. Instead, I saw a list of strangers with percentages indicating how much DNA we shared. My closest paternal match was someone named Marcus Rodriguez, showing a 23.4% DNA connection. Estimated relationship, uncle or half-sibling. I'd never heard that name in my life. My hands shook as I clicked on his profile. Limited information, but it showed he was in his 40s and lived in Arizona. Arizona. I'd never been to Arizona. My family had never mentioned knowing anyone in Arizona, but apparently I was closely related to someone there. Someone who might be my half-brother. Someone who might know who my real father was. I called in sick to work. I couldn't pretend to care about spreadsheets and invoices when my entire identity was crumbling and rebuilding itself in real time. I spent the day researching Marcus Rodriguez, trying to find any connection to my life in Connecticut. Social media searches revealed a man who looked nothing like the Walsh side of my family, but had my exact nose and similar eyes. He worked in construction, had 2 kids, and posted a lot of pictures from hiking trips in the desert. He looked like he could be my brother. The resemblance was unsettling and exciting. I drafted a dozen messages to him through the DNA site's messaging system, but deleted them all. What do you say to a stranger who might be your family? Hi, I think we might be related, and also I think my entire life has been a lie. I settled for something simple. Hi Marcus, I'm Kiera. We showed up as a DNA match and I was hoping we could connect. I'm trying to learn more about my biological family. My finger hovered over the send button for 20 minutes before I finally pressed it. Marcus responded within 3 hours. His message was warm but cautious. Hi Kiera, I've been getting a lot of DNA matches lately, but yours is one of the closest. I'd be happy to help if I can. Can you tell me a little about what you're looking for? I wrote back with the basics. I was 24, lived in Connecticut, recently discovered through DNA testing that my father might not be my biological father. I asked if he'd be willing to share information about his family tree to help me figure out the connection. His response came back an hour later, and it changed everything. Kiera, based on our DNA percentage and the fact that you're looking for your father, I think you might be my niece. My brother Danny had a relationship with a woman named Patricia in Connecticut about 25 years ago. She was married to someone else, and things ended badly. He never knew if she had the baby. Could that Patricia be your mother? My coffee mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. I called Marcus that evening, my heart pounding as his phone rang. When he answered, his voice sounded like mine, but deeper, with a slight southwestern accent that seemed familiar despite being new. Kiera, he said, and somehow hearing my name in his voice made everything real. We talked for 2 hours. He told me about his brother Danny, who'd been working construction in Connecticut in the late 90s. Danny had met a married woman named Patricia and fallen hard. The relationship lasted about 6 months before her husband found out and threatened to destroy both their lives. Patricia chose her marriage and told Danny she was pregnant, but that she could never see him again. Danny had wanted to fight for her, for the baby. But Patricia insisted it would ruin too many lives. He never got over it, Marcus said quietly. He used to wonder about you, especially around your birthday. He'd calculate how old you'd be, what grade you'd be in. He died in a car accident 3 years ago, but he never stopped hoping he'd meet you someday. I hung up the phone and cried for an hour. Not sad tears exactly, but overwhelmed ones. I had a biological father named Danny Rodriguez who'd loved me before I was born and thought about me until he died. I had an uncle who wanted to know me and nieces and nephews I'd never met. I had a heritage that included family traditions, recipes, and stories that belonged to me by blood instead of by obligation. But I also had a mother who'd lied to me for 24 years. A mother who'd let me grow up feeling like I didn't belong when she knew exactly why I felt that way. A mother who'd watched Melissa make jokes about adoption and said nothing, knowing those jokes hit closer to truth than anyone realized. The anger started small, like a pilot light, then grew into something bigger and fiercer than anything I'd ever felt. Patricia Walsh had watched me struggle my entire life and never told me why. That felt unforgivable. I spent the weekend planning my confrontation. I printed out the DNA results, Marcus's messages, and photos he'd sent of Danny and their family. I wanted proof that couldn't be denied or dismissed. I practiced different approaches, calm and rational, hurt and pleading, angry and demanding. In the end, I decided on simple and direct. I would present the evidence and ask for the truth. No accusations, no drama, just facts and a request for honesty. On Sunday afternoon, I drove to my parents' house. Tom was watching football in the living room, beer in hand, yelling at the TV like he always did. Patricia was in the kitchen, meal prepping for the week ahead. A normal suburban Sunday scene that felt like a stage set, now that I knew it, was all built on lies. I knocked on the kitchen doorframe. "Mom," I said, "we need to talk." She looked up from her cutting board, took one look at the folder in my hands, and went very still. "What's that?" she asked, though her voice suggested she already knew. I sat down at the kitchen table and spread out the papers methodically. The DNA results. Marcus's photo. A picture of Danny that showed him looking exactly like me but male. "I took a DNA test," I said simply. "I know about Danny Rodriguez." The knife slipped from her hand and clattered to the cutting board. For a moment, she just stared at the evidence, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Then she sat down across from me, suddenly looking older than her 52 years. "How much do you know?" she whispered. "I know he was my biological father. I know you had an affair. I know he wanted to be in my life, and you chose your marriage instead." I kept my voice steady, but my hands were shaking. "I know you've let me spend 24 years feeling like I didn't belong in this family because I actually don't." She started crying then, quiet tears that felt more like relief than shame. "I was going to tell you," she said, which was the first lie I caught in real time. "When?" I asked. "When you were 18? 21? 30? When exactly were you planning to tell me my entire life was based on a lie?" She flinched at the word lie, but didn't deny it. "Your father, Tom, he forgave me for the affair, but only if I never contacted Danny again and never told anyone the truth about the baby's paternity. He said he'd raise you as his own, love you like his own, but only if we could all move forward like it never happened." I thought about Tom teaching me to ride a bike, helping with homework, walking me down the aisle at my cousin's wedding when I was the flower girl. He had treated me like his daughter in many ways, but he'd also treated me differently than Melissa, and now I knew why. "He did the best he could," Patricia continued, "but it was hard for him sometimes, especially when you reminded him of Danny." The truth hit me like a physical blow. Every time Tom had seemed distant or frustrated with me, it wasn't because I'd done something wrong. It was because I looked like another man's child. "And Melissa?" I asked. "Does she know?" Patricia nodded reluctantly. "We told her when she was 16. She was asking questions about why you looked so different, and we thought she was mature enough to handle the truth. We made her promise never to tell you." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Melissa had known for 8 years. She'd known while she made jokes about me being adopted. She'd known while she watched me struggle to fit in. She'd known, and she'd used that knowledge to hurt me. "The Thanksgiving joke?" I asked. "She knows exactly how cruel that was." Patricia's face crumpled. "She wasn't supposed to. She promised she'd never say anything. But I was already standing up, gathering my papers, my evidence, my new understanding of my entire family. She's been torturing me with the truth for years, and you let her," I said. "You all let her." I headed for the door, but Patricia caught my arm. "Kiera, please, we're still your family. Tom loves you. Melissa loves you. This doesn't change anything." But it changed everything, and we both knew it. I went straight to Melissa's apartment. She lived in a trendy complex downtown, the kind of place with a doorman and floor-to-ceiling windows that I could never afford on my bookkeeper's salary. When she opened the door, she was in yoga pants and a tank top, her hair in a perfect messy bun that probably took 20 minutes to achieve. "Kiera," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" I held up the DNA results. "We need to talk." Her face shifted, the practiced innocence replaced by something warier. She stepped aside to let me in, and I noticed her apartment was even more perfectly curated than her Instagram suggested. Everything white and gold and deliberately casual. I sat on her pristine white couch and spread out the papers again. The routine was becoming familiar, almost calming. Present evidence. Ask for truth. Watch people crumble when they realize their lies had expiration dates. "So," I said, looking directly at her, "how long have you known I was Danny Rodriguez's daughter?" Melissa sat down across from me, but her usual confidence was nowhere to be found. "Since I was 16, she admitted. Mom and Dad told me because I kept asking why we looked so different. She twisted her hands in her lap. They made me promise not to tell you. And the adoption jokes? I asked. The Instagram post? The years of making me feel like I didn't belong? She had the grace to look ashamed. I was angry, she said quietly. You got all this attention for being different, for being sensitive and special. And I knew the truth. I knew you actually were different, and everyone felt sorry for you because of it. It felt unfair. The honesty was startling and infuriating. You tortured me because you were jealous that people felt sorry for me? I didn't mean to torture you, she said, but the words sounded weak even to her. It was hard watching everyone treat you like this fragile, mysterious thing when I knew exactly what you were. What I was. Not who. What. Like I was a problem to be solved instead of a person to be loved. I found my uncle, I said. Danny's brother Marcus. He told me about my father, about how he wanted to know me, how he thought about me every year on my birthday until he died. Melissa's face went white. He's dead? 3 years ago. Car accident. He never got to meet me because Mom chose to protect her marriage instead of letting me know who I really was. I stood up, gathering my papers for the 3rd time that day. And you chose to make jokes about the most painful thing I didn't even know about myself. Melissa started crying then, but they weren't the calculated tears she'd used to get out of trouble as a kid. These looked real. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry, Kiera. I didn't realize how much it was hurting you. But the apology felt too little, too late. She'd had 8 years to think about how much she was hurting me. She'd chosen to keep hurting me anyway. I don't know if I can forgive this, I said honestly. Any of this. And I walked out of her perfect apartment and into the complicated mess of figuring out who I was without the family that had raised me. That night, I called Marcus again. I confronted them, I told him. My mother, my sister, they both knew the truth. There was a long pause. How are you feeling? He asked finally. Lost, I admitted. Like everything I thought I knew about myself was wrong. Not everything, Marcus said gently. You're still you. You're still the person who was brave enough to take that DNA test, smart enough to piece together the truth, strong enough to demand honesty from people who've been lying to you your whole life. That's not about genetics. That's about character. We talked about Danny again, about his dreams of being a father, about the stories he'd told Marcus about falling in love with a woman who was brave enough to leave an unhappy marriage. He would have been proud of you, Marcus said, for not settling for lies just because they were comfortable. Before we hung up, he invited me to visit Arizona. I know it's a lot, he said, but you have family here who'd love to meet you. No pressure, no obligations, just an open door if you want to walk through it. I took a leave of absence from work and booked a flight to Phoenix. I needed distance from Connecticut, from the Walsh family drama, from the complicated mess of learning that love and lies could coexist in the same house. Marcus picked me up at the airport, and seeing him in person was like looking into a fun house mirror. Same nose, same stubborn chin, same way of standing with arms crossed when thinking. He introduced me to his wife Elena and their 2 teenagers, who welcomed me with the easy warmth I'd never experienced in my own family. We drove to the cemetery where Danny was buried. Marcus had brought flowers and a photo of me from social media. Danny, meet your daughter, he said simply, placing both on the headstone. I stood there looking at my father's name carved in granite, feeling grief for a relationship I'd never gotten to have, and gratitude for a family I was just beginning to know. That evening, Elena showed me photos of Danny as a kid, teenager, young man. The resemblance was undeniable. But more than that, the stories painted a picture of someone who would have loved me unconditionally. I stayed in Arizona for 2 weeks. I met cousins and family friends, learned about traditions that suddenly felt like mine, discovered that I'd inherited Danny's talent for fixing things and his inability to sit still during movies. When I flew back to Connecticut, I wasn't the same person who'd left. I'd found my place in the world, and it wasn't in the Walsh family house where I'd spent 24 years trying to belong. I moved out of my Hartford apartment and found a new place closer to work but farther from my family. I changed my name legally from Kiera Walsh to Kiera Rodriguez. When Patricia called crying, asking me to reconsider, I told her the truth. She'd had 24 years to choose honesty, and she'd chosen deception every single day. When Melissa texted asking if we could talk, I wrote back, maybe someday, but not today. The DNA test had cost $99. The truth it revealed was priceless. I finally knew who I was, where I came from, and what family really meant. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. I was free to be exactly who I was, Danny Rodriguez's daughter.